Play ball.
How you doing, baseball fans, and welcome to another edition of the Brushback with JP Ricciardi. I'm John Arezzi. Another week here at the Brushback. The Allstar game is in the books, with the American League beating the National League, score of 5-3 in Texas, and the baseball draft is complete as well. Here to discuss it with us, the former general manager of the Toronto Bluejays, the man who worked as a top front office executive for the A's, the Mets, the Giants. He's a paisan of mine, JP. How you doing this week?
Hey, John. How you doing? Can't believe the All-Star game's over.
I know.
Can't believe how fast this season is flying.
Yeah, the season is flying. And did you get the opportunity to see the game last night?
I watched bits and pieces of it. You know, the All-Star game for me, it used to be a big thing when I was a kid. It's now I just kind of poke in and poke out and see what's going on. But, you know, sounded like it was a great game overall. I didn't watch first pitch to last pitch, but, you know, always entertaining and always nice to see the best players on the field.
Oh, yeah, it was great to see Paul Skeens, that rookie sensation from the Pirates, start the game after only being called up to the majors just a few months ago. Of course, baseball's premier attraction, Shohei Ohtani, hit a moonshot, so that was kind of cool to see. Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in the outfield, seeing them. But at the end of the day, 5-3 American League, 10 of their last 11. The dominance continues. What is your explanation for the American League being so dominant for so many years?
I think it's just a run of luck, to be honest with you. And at times the National League's had a run of this. A lot of this is who's playing, what part of the game they're in. I mean, there's so many just different factors that line up. I don't think it's the American League has this blueprint to how to win the All-Star game. I just think it's just happened, and you know, wouldn't be surprised if the National League in the next 5 or 6 years rattle off 5 in a row. It's just one of those things. I will say this: I did not like the uniforms at all. They have to go back to just letting the players. There was a couple of things that were disappointing to me. The uniforms were disappointing. The national anthem singer, that was a total embarrassment. Especially in Texas, man, you can't find someone in Texas to sing the.
You mean for the Derby?
For the Derby
with Ingrid Angress, who is a 4-time Grammy nominated country artist.
Yeah, well, she might have been a Grammy nominated, but that was a terrible performance.
Well, she went into rehab, after that. Literally, she said she was drunk on the field.
I know, I heard the story, but just embarrassing for our country.
It was.
But anyway, outside of that national anthem at the Home Run Derby and the All-Star uniforms, everything else was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish they go back to the original uniform. The guys got to wear their original uniforms. But one thing I want to ask, and then we'll get into hot takes and get deep into that. It's a good showcase for guys. Now, there's a guy that might have been flying under the radar nationally, and he's the Boston Red Sox hitter who got the game winner last night, and Jarren Duran. Do you know much about this youngster? And he certainly made an impression last night.
Yeah, Duran is a 7th-round pick from Long Beach State. He's taken a long time to get to the big leagues and become the player that I think the Red Sox thought he was going to be. But I think this year, obviously, he's put it all together. I think Cora's done a very good job of massaging him and challenging him to play every day. But outside of Rafael Devers, I can't think of a more valuable player for the Red Sox than Duran's been this year. He's done it all. He plays hard. He plays every game. He's hit for power. His speed is great. He can score from first on a double. He can steal bases. He's really been, I think, the secret weapon for the Red Sox this year. And if he continues to do it, he's going to get some MVP votes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have an exciting show today. JP, you got another good guest coming on in just a bit. Tell us about it.
We got Mike Bordick on today. Mike, I've known a long time. I go back a long way. I signed him back in 1986 as a non-drafted free agent. And it'd be nice to hear his story and tell his story about what it's like not to be a high pick and be able to go on and play a long time in the big leagues. So Mike's obviously one of my favorites, and I'm looking forward to him telling his story. And hopefully some of the kids are out there listening. It's a great case of perseverance.
Oh, absolutely. Can't wait to see you guys with the batter up in just a bit. But let's get right into this week's hot takes brought to you by Percy's Appliance Outlet, featuring brand name appliances at up to 80% off regular retail prices. They are Worcester's largest dealer of home appliances and electronics, serving Worcester for over 80 years. Check out all of this week's specials by going to Percy's.com. That's PERCYS.com, or give them a call 508-438-6800. All right, JP, hot takes. 2024 Major League Baseball draft was held over the past few days. The teams load up on prospects, 10 rounds. Hopes that someday these kids make an impact for them in the majors. What stood out to you this week with the draft?
Well, I think one of the things that stood out is the college kids continue to get drafted high. The college kids continue to rise up the ranks as far as numbers that are being taken. And I think that's a byproduct of how the draft has been set up over the last 4 years. We only draft 20 rounds now, which is criminal. And most of the young high school kids, they're either very, very good players that are ready for pro ball, or they're fringy guys who want a lot of money who aren't ready for pro ball. And they're actually better off to go to college. And I think you're seeing that come to fruition now, that these kids that aren't ready to play pro ball go to college and end up coming back in 3 years and being higher draft picks. So that's why I think you're seeing, so many college players being drafted. I think this draft was decent at the top, but not like last year's draft. Last year's draft had Cruz, Skeens, Langford. Those three guys are going to be plus major league players. The guys who went this year, I think they're good players. The first baseman from Georgia, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. He's got big power. He got a chance to be a corner guy. Caglione, the left-handed pitcher, first baseman for Florida, the Kansas City got, I thought was a good pick. The kid from Oregon State, the Australian kid, the first second baseman to be taken over one, I think is a very good hitter. I think it's a good crop. I think the bar was really raised last year in the draft.
Yeah, you brought up the point of the college players. Now, history was made in this year's draft. College players were taken with the first 8 picks of the draft. It was the latest without a high school player being selected since the draft was created in 1965. So, what you said exactly right, JP. 8 first picks. The first 8 were all college guys. And then you bring up the Cleveland Guardians pick, Travis Bazzana, second base from Oregon State. The Australian-born player had a slash line of 407, 568, 911, 28 home runs in college his last season. So amazing. And one guy I do want to discuss with you, JP, and it's really interesting, is pick number 15. Seattle Mariners made this pick, and a kid by the name of Jarangelo Senja from Mississippi State. He is a pitcher who throws from both the left and right hand side.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. I've only seen video of him. I've seen him a couple of times in games at Mississippi State on television, so I really can't break him down. But it's just amazing to think that a guy can throw. First of all, just being able to throw with both hands is amazing. But to be able to compete with both hands is going to be really, really interesting to see how he's used going forward. And sounds like he's got a lot of talent and a lot of upside. So I'm going to follow that one closely.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And he can throw 99 from the right side, 95 from the left side. Only 1% of the population possesses that ability to throw with both arms. His ability
most people can't brush their teeth with both hands.
I know.
But you know what's going to be interesting about him, John, is if he becomes a starter. Can you start him on Monday and then start him on Tuesday? I mean, the only fatigue in his body is going to be just his body fatigue, his legs, his upper body, whatever it is. But his arm's not going to be sore. So, you wonder if this guy this is going to be really interesting to follow because I'm curious to see how Seattle's going to use him. He could start on a Monday. He could start on a Tuesday. Then you give him Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. His next day to pitch would be Friday. and he could come back on a Friday and a Saturday. So it's conceivable, and I'm not, throwing something that's crazy out there. This guy could pitch for you 3 to 4 times as a starter during the week. So that's going
That,
to be fun to watch.
that's insane. Or he could use the special glove and, like, depending on who's up, a righty or a lefty, that's where he positions the glove
Yeah.
and he throws it that way too. So it'll be interesting to watch that one. And uh, he has drawn comparisons also to Marcus Stroman because of his stuff, and he has a smaller frame. So it's going to be interesting to watch that, JP. I love the draft. I watch it every year, and I just think it's exciting. This year, I was just kind of I just noticed right away the college players were getting the picks more
Yeah,
than
and
the
if
high
you
school guys.
follow baseball closely, obviously it's the lifeblood of the game in the sense that it's the one way that every team gets an opportunity to bring talent into their system. I think that the draft has totally changed in the last 5 years. I'm not so sure it's being changed for the better, but I think the fact that we're eliminating rounds, we're not allowing other kids to get opportunities to play. The guy that's coming on our show today, Mike Bordick, was signed as a free agent, wasn't even drafted. Mike Bordick might not even get a chance to play professional baseball today, along with a lot of other guys that are drafted from the 20th round. Ryan Sandberg's a Hall of Famer, and he was drafted in I believe, the 20th round. So maybe he would have got in under the wire. But there's a lot of guys from the 20th round on that have played in the big leagues that in today's game will not get an opportunity to play. And that's really sad.
Yeah. So you're saying that over the years, like when you were a GM, how many rounds were there? And now it's way less, right?
Well, John, when I first started scouting way back in 1985, there was 100 rounds, and there was a January draft. So there was a January draft that went 3 or 4 rounds, and then there was a draft that went from the June 3rd, whatever it was. You could draft. I remember the Houston Astros one year drafted up to 100 rounds. So then they cut that down, which they needed to do. I Just my own personal opinion, I believe the draft should be 25 rounds. That I think is fair because we're signing more players in Latin America than we're signing in America and Canada. So you're telling me that the small country of the Dominican, which I know has produced a lot of good players, but teams are signing basically 500 to 600 players a year out of the Dominican. That's all we're signing or drafting out of Major League Baseball in America and Canada and Puerto Rico is 500-600 players. So something's not right there. And that's why I think if we went to 25 rounds, at least 5 more rounds, that's more kids that could play. If you want to make it 30, 30 is fine too. I'm just for every opportunity to get kids to play. But we've cut minor league teams. We don't have enough places for these kids to play. They don't get a fair chance to play. And it's really criminal what's happening to our minor league system.
Well, I appreciate that take, JP. And we're going to be back with another hot take with JP. We're going to discuss the second half of the baseball season right after this word from Percy's Home Appliance Outlet.
Percy's Appliance Showroom, featuring a huge selection of the finest brand names from value to luxury at the guaranteed lowest prices. Whether it's an individual appliance or package, buy with confidence with Percy's Price Match Guarantee. Percy's offers exceptional customer service, fast, expert installation, delivery, and removal. For same-day shopping, look for the green in-stock buttons on Percy's.com and available long-term interest-free financing. Percy's, first on Gold Star Boulevard, Worcester.
All right, back with the hot takes. The second half of the season begins this weekend, JP. Several surprises in the majors right now. 9 teams in the National League vying for the wild card placement. Some teams in both leagues are underperforming in a big way. Others surprising the analysts. Give us your hot take as we head into the second half of the season.
Well, I think the iron is the iron. I think the Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, in the East. I think just looking through this, the Yankees, the Orioles, the Indians, the iron that's been from start to finish for the most part is going to be the playoff teams. What I find amazing is there's teams that are 3 to 4 to 5 games under 500. But if you go look at their schedule, several of these teams are playing teams in the second half with horrendous records. There's a couple of teams, the Giants being one of them, they play the A's, the Rockies, the Mariners. I'm trying to remember. I think I looked in
White Sox, maybe?
They play the White Sox. 24 or 26 of their games. And they're not the only team. There's other teams out there. They play 26 of their first 40 games. against teams with sub 500 records. So if you're 4 to 5 games under 500 at the All-Star break, I don't think it's really any reason to panic, because you can make some of this up depending on how well you play in the second half. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of these teams that are fighting for that last wild card line up. There's been some surprising teams. I think the Royals have been unbelievable surprising, and they're holding on. I think that's fun to watch. The Mets have played amazing the last, let's say, 3 weeks. They've put themselves in a position. So I think it's going to be really fun to watch as we get through the trading deadline, which teams step up, which teams make a move. And then after the trading deadline, it's the dog days of August, and then it's the September push. So we got a lot of fun things in front of us, and it's going to be interesting to see which one of these borderline playoff teams makes a move.
It's going to be a very exciting second half. And of course, in the coming weeks, we're going to talk about the trade deadline coming up. So there's lots more baseball here at the Brushback with JP. But right now, it's time for the Batter Up with JP, brought to you by the Worcester Bravehearts. And if you're looking for affordable family fun, you've come to the right place. Check out the 4-time Futures Collegiate Baseball League champion Bravehearts. Free parking all season long, and you can get your all-you-can-eat ticket for just $20. Follow the Bravehearts on Instagram at Woo Baseball. For information on all Bravehearts games and upcoming special promotions, that's where you should go to check out some of the latest news. But you can also go to WorcesterBraveheartsStore.com. Check out their kids club, their summer camps, group and birthday party outings. It's always great family fun. Get your tickets to a Bravehearts game today. On today's Batter Up with JP, we bring on the player who holds the MLB record for most consecutive errorless games and chances by a Major League shortstop. He went 110 straight games without an error. He played in the big leagues from 1990 to 2003 with stops along the way with the Oakland A's, Baltimore Orioles twice, the Mets, and Bluejays. He was a 2000 MLB Allstar. He's also been a minor league instructor, a coach, TV analyst, and he's a favorite of JP's. Let's say hello to Mike Bordick.
Hey, Bordy.
Hey, JP. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me today.
So I guess when I think of Bordy, who's one of my all-time favorites for a lot of reasons, but I guess I was there at the beginning and I was there at the end.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll tell you a special moment with Bordy. He probably don't even know this, but he broke that record when we were playing, when I was in Toronto and we were playing the Orioles. And the record for errorless games. And they had a little moment. They made an announcement, and I felt like a proud father that day.
Emmy, sorry, that's my dog.
That's all right. We've had a lot of dogs on the show.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get into a bunch of things, but the first thing I want to ask you is, when did you fall in love with baseball?
Oh my God. Well, I apologize about my dog right now.
Don't worry about it.
So anyway, I fell in love with baseball, I guess, at a young age. I think, you know, JP, back in the day, all kids played all sports, right? And
Yep.
I loved every sport. So when baseball season was around, it was my favorite sport. When baseball season was over, I chucked my glove in the closet and I picked up a football. When football season was over, I was shooting hoops with my friends. So I think just being, you know, loving sport, loving competition, and I think trying to make myself as good as I could be really helped me. And then, to be honest, so playing sports was my passion, but I really love football. And I thought football was going to be the sport, but unfortunately, I never really grew. Now, I know there's smaller guys that play football, but I also had some intelligence and knew that I wouldn't have lasted very long if I ever stepped on a college football field. Yeah. And I got the opportunity to go to the University of Maine and play baseball. So that was when I truly fell in love with it, because you don't really know, I don't think, at least I didn't. I was kind of naive. I know I enjoyed all sports, but when you have to actually do it every day and focus on trying just to get better at mundane skills that baseball offers, that's when you find out if you really love it. And going to the University of Maine, they stressed fundamentals, and I was just locked in on trying to make myself as good as I could be in the fundamentals of the game.
On one thing about this show, there's a lot of younger kids who listen to it. There's a lot of kids who, are trying to play professional baseball.
Yeah.
So just so they understand your background, Mike was not drafted. Mike was a free agent sign that was signed after the draft, and he is a self-made player. Played a long time in the big leagues. Explain to some of the younger kids out there and some of the people that are listening, just talk to them about your journey.
Yeah, well, it's pretty interesting, to be honest with you. And I am not self-made, and I don't think anybody really is. It takes people that that care about you around you. I was really lucky, even though I didn't like my dad when I was a kid because he was a hard ass. He was on me all the time, and he saw something like most parents do. If they see a little spark, then they kind of push their kids. Well, my dad was an old school guy, and he coached me when I was a kid. Things like that. So I had him as a great mentor to kind of continue to push me and try to get the most out of me that he thought I had in me, and of course, my coaches, every coach I had, I respected for their time and their ideas and ways to try to make me better. So there's no way you do anything on your own. But I will say this, everybody has a story and everybody has bumps in the road. And I don't even know if you're aware of this, but my dad was in the Air Force and we traveled around a lot. And that in and of itself is pretty hard for a kid to go from town to town and try to make a team or make new friends. And sports was always the thing that kind of helped me make friends, I guess. So that being said, we were jumping from town to town and just trying to find a way to kind of, I guess, be at ease socially. And when I went to middle school, we packed up, we went to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Pease Air Force Base, and new town, new kids, first time ever going to school off base. I got cut from my middle school basketball team. I got cut from my middle school baseball team, and I got cut from the freshman football team all in 1 year. And it's at a crucial time, a middle school kid, that's when you're making some pretty big decisions. And somehow I was able to stick with it. And I think the reason why, there was a youth center that had a rec program. That's the only reason I got to play extra basketball. The rec program kept me in baseball, and the rec program kept me in football too, until we moved to Maine. And I don't know, I started growing and had more of an opportunity to actually play the sports. So, there were bumps along the way and challenges, I think, that every kid has in front of them. And the bottom line, I guess, things that I learned along the way, man, you got to be persistent. I don't care if you're in sports or whatever you do. If you're not persistent and determined, you're just never going to make it. So you have to have a little chip on your shoulder, maybe some drive that pushes you through, but nobody else is going to do it. That's the problem. We rely on coaches and things like that. But it wasn't until I got to college and realized, listen, it's great to be a part of the team, but I got to take care of my own self to help make my team better. And in turn, I might get recognized here and there. So it's the work you put in. And honestly, there are absolutely no shortcuts. So, everybody wants the easy way out. I think in a lot of ways, that's just human nature. But when you can start, I think, finally embracing the work that has to go into making yourself good, when you accept that and in some ways take it as a challenge, I didn't look at it as a challenge. I liked it because I really liked it. I enjoyed taking ground balls. I enjoyed trying to find ways and the curiosity of trying to make myself as good as I could be, whether it be in the weight room, on the field with reps, just focus. I did things psychologically. And I don't mean this by a screwball thing, but, visualization and things like that. So trying to tap into things to really maximize, what I had, what God gave me as a little bit of a gift. And I think part of that was just kind of a put your nose to the grindstone attitude and try to do things as right as I could.
So you go to University of Maine. I'm assuming you're not highly recruited. Maine, and for what people don't understand, back then Maine had a really good program, and the country was broken up almost geographically, and Maine, because of where they were, got to go to the College World Series a lot because they came out of that region. Now they send all these schools all over the place. But,
Right.
Tell us about your experience at Maine and your development as you played at Maine.
Yeah, well, Maine was unbelievable, and you're right, man. The University of Maine back in the early '80s, we had like a little dynasty. We went to the College World Series 5 out of 6 years, from
Right.
1980 to 1986. So they're starting to get some national exposure. Some players on the team were starting to get drafted. We had a number one pick up there, Billy Swift, when I was there. Great pitcher, played a long time in the big leagues, and so you're getting that type of exposure. I knew of the Maine baseball team because I kind of grew up right down the street from the University of Maine, and they had already gone to 3 World Series in a row. And I'm playing for the Bangor American Legion team, but my head coach was a guy named John Perry. John Perry was a first baseman for the University of Maine just a couple years earlier, so he had a little connection with John Winkin, the head coach up at the University of Maine. And so John Perry had his eye on me and tried to kind of keep steering me in the right direction because I was kind of a raw, kind of a rough young kid from Winterport, Maine. I'd gotten in trouble in high school, and John Perry and John Winkin and the rest of the University of Maine team kind of helped get me back on track and focused on baseball and being around like-minded guys. So I got up there with some stars. Jeff Paul was a guy that got drafted by the Minnesota Twins. 4 years in a row, he went to the College World Series, and he was our team captain, and he was teaching me the right way to go about my business. Billy Swift was on that team. Billy Reynolds, who got drafted by the Oakland A's that year, was on that team. And we had 5 or 6 guys that got drafted, just a lot of really good talent and guys that just played the game the right way. And I think that went a long way for me. There may have been a skill set, but being a baseball player helps a lot of guys, knowing where to throw the ball, knowing situations, not being surprised and caught off guard. And I think that boded well for me in getting more opportunities, or at least maybe any opportunity to play the game.
Yeah, Maine was a very fundamentally sound team because back then you spent so much time inside that you had to be good at catching ground balls and all the little things. So we fast forward to your junior year, and you go to the College World Series. So my first introduction to Mike Bordick is I am down at Hartford, and I'm watching Jeff Bagwell play third base, and Bordy's playing for Maine, and I like Billy Reynolds, so I was down there watching Maine, and I keep seeing this guy at shortstop, and I was a middle infielder, so I always gravitated to the middle. And all he did was just catch the ball, catch the ball. Every time he had to make a play, he caught the ball, caught the ball. I said, this kid's just growing on me. The more I watch him, he just keeps growing on me. So, stupidity on my part, I fly up to the University of Maine to watch you guys play University of Vermont, and
Oh,
there's,
no.
there's no scouts in the stands. It's about 12 degrees out, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and I'm going, what the hell am I doing here? But anyway, same thing. It was freezing out. You made all the plays, put the bat on the ball. So I write my report. I really like this kid, like to give him an opportunity to play. And, back then, you couldn't get information like you get information today. It was, and Winkin was very tough to deal with for the
Yeah.
scout. So we couldn't get much information. So long story short, we go through the draft, and because I don't have a lot of information on Mike, uh, the A's say, well, we're not going to take him. They took another kid in the fifth round, a kid from Oregon State. So now we fast forward to the summer, and my boss at the time was a guy named Dick Bogard. He's never been to the Cape, and he says, I got to come to the Cape because we drafted Heeman in the first round from USF. He says, I can't sign him. I got to come down and talk to him. So we go down there, and I said, hey, remember the kid I had on my draft list that I really liked? He goes, yeah, the Bordick kid. I said, he's playing tonight. I said, I want to take you over to see him. So anyway, we see Heeman. We go over, and you played that night. I think it was in YD. Anyway, we played. So he says to me, he says, you think you could sign him? I said, well, I can give it a shot. I said, I'd love to sign him. He says, go ahead. So anyway, that's how that was my Mike Bordick story in the sense of, and then I talked to Mike, and you could take it from there.
Yeah, no, that was pretty cool. And I never really knew. It's funny, the link between Scott Heeman. I thought it was somebody else you guys
Yeah.
were watching. But of course, Scott Heeman and I became great friends and roommates in Double A and even in the big league. So, That was so much fun. But I remember the day you whistled to me and called me over, and I struggled. I really did initially in Cape Cod. It was hard to hit with the wooden bat. The talent was just off the charts. It was like every night facing great players. And I remember part of that YD team, one of my teammates was Craig Biggio, the catcher from Seton Hall, who ended up the next year being the number one pick, and of course went on to Hall of Fame notoriety, success. But he and I were both hitting under 200, and we were like going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And I ended up having a pretty good weekend of baseball, and that's when you called me over. And I guess the rest is history. I know I went to Worcester and signed in your uncle's restaurant. Yeah, so that was great. I had some awesome lasagna, and then headed out to to Medford, Oregon, and got on a bus and just started playing baseball. And I thought it was the coolest thing. Now, JP, I know you probably know by just knowing me back then, I was very naive about a lot of things. I knew this: getting paid to play baseball was a dream come true, and I could not believe it. It was so much fun just meeting guys from all over the country, meeting guys from different places, Dominican, everywhere, and everybody having the same kind of passion and love for the game of baseball. And I learned so much, I think, by watching so many guys. And I think that might be a lost art nowadays. I hope that players don't rely on their coaches. I mean, you got to rely on your coach, obviously, but watching other players go about their business, it helped me more than anything. And to be honest with you, when I was at the University of Maine, I always thought I had quick hands. When I saw a Latin American guy do the slow roller and get rid of have the glove hand transfer, I didn't even think that was allowed. I thought that was illegal. And I said, wait a second, we can do this stuff? And I started practicing that just because I was watching young Latin infielders, and that helped my game so much. And then learned how to be better with my pursuit angles and things, because I didn't have the strongest arm, but I had to figure out how to use it at the shortstop position.
So, talk to the listeners. Tell them about your rise through the minor leagues, the things you learned from every level, the people that touched you, the people that helped you. One thing about the A's, I'll say this: we didn't have a lot of money, but we had really good instructors, guys who cared, guys who worked their butts off, from the Keith Lippman to the Carl Keels, and maybe overkill sometimes, but you were going to get your money's worth. I'll say this: it doesn't happen today, but if you got drafted by the Oakland A's back in the 80s and the 90s, you did not get cheated.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I was so lucky to come up with the Oakland A's. Now, there could be an argument that there wasn't a lot of movement because the team was just stacked. But think about the players they had just recently called up to the big leagues and became Rookie of the Year. Jose Canseco, Mark McGwire, and then Walt Weiss, all consecutive years. So they were being developed through the organization. It was one of the strongest organizations in all of baseball. And yeah, they had great instructors. They believed in doing things the right way, and they promoted guys that had success. Especially I think a college guy. They said, "All right, push, push, push," and fortunately, as I was able to take advantage of a couple opportunities. So Medford went well. I probably didn't tear the cover off the ball. Probably hit 240, but I felt like I played pretty good. First year of pro ball, and in my mind, I thought big leagues is right around the corner. The next year, I came to spring training in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was an unbelievable sea of green and gold. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be impossible. How the heck does a guy make it to the big leagues? You got the best big league team in all of baseball, and you've got all these guys in the minor leagues trying to make it to the top. And I found out early that I had to find a way to separate myself, and it wasn't through doing fancy things like behind my back. When I saw guys do that, I said, I've got to keep trying to do things the right way and just catch the ball the right way. So I felt like anytime I saw a guy that had some incredible athleticism, but maybe did something that you just don't do in a game, right? I just said, okay, I've got an advantage over that guy. He just lost a rep by doing that, messing around. So I took the reps important. I was lucky enough to play my first year in Modesto, California. My manager was Tommy Reynolds. And you talk about having a sponsor. I had, of course, John Winkin. You were a sponsor of mine. My dad was a sponsor of mine. Tommy Reynolds had more influence, I think, on my career than maybe, arguably, anybody, because I played for Tommy in Single A in Modesto, California. He was great, laid back, let me play. He loved hard ball players, guys that played the game right, tagged guys hard, ran the bases hard, broke up double plays. He loved that, and I was able to bring that for him. he asked for me to go to Double A, not as a starter, but as a utility player. So the next year I got promoted to Double A. They had Darren Duffy, who was a first-round pick, was the shortstop in Double A. He was the shortstop first-round pick the year I signed in '86. Walt Weiss was the year before, and he was in the big leagues as a rookie of the year, right? So there was a long list of shortstops. Duffy was shortstop. They had a Latin guy, Jerry Peguero, I think, played second base. And they said, you got to start learning how to play other positions. Well, it was like the first or second game, and Duffy dove for a ball in the hole. I never wish ill on anybody, but injuries were there for me throughout my early part of my career too. Darren Duffy went down with a bad thumb, and that helped me go to shortstop in Double A. I made the All-Star team again. Next thing you know, I'm looked at as a prospect. Carl Keel's coming down, and he's talking to me about, this and that. And Tommy Reynolds ends up getting promoted to the big leagues. Okay, '89, I go to AAA as a utility player again. They had a nice veteran team. Dickie Scott was on that team. I played some short. I played some second base and third, and went through that year, and I was really overmatched. I thought maybe I've hit my limit because offensively it was a struggle, man. Hitting in Tacoma when you're a little guy like me is a nightmare, dude. It's a nightmare. So I struggled offensively, and here we go. The hand of God came down in 1990. The owners locked the players out. And in 1990, when they finally came to an agreement, the rosters were expanded by 2 players. Tommy Reynolds is in the big leagues as the big league third base coach. Tony La Russa says, who would you trust to catch the baseball? That's it. Nothing else. Just catch the baseball. And Tommy Reynolds said, Mike Bordick's your guy. And that gave me the opportunity to make the big leagues in 1990. I didn't play a lot, but I got in late in games, and he asked me to catch balls. Called me, sent me down after the lockout, ended that first month. Called me back up in September. Didn't play a lot. I think I got my first major league hit though, so I was probably like something like 1 for 14. But exposed myself to Tony La Russa and arguably the best team in baseball. They had gone to the World Series in '88. '89, and they were the front runners for '90. And Tony La Russa, after September, said, Mike, thanks a lot. We're going to the postseason. You can go do what you want. And I said, Skip, do you think I can go down to Scottsdale, Arizona, and make a hitting tape with Rick Burleson? Rick Burleson was one of my childhood idols, man. He was a shortstop for the Red Sox when I was a kid growing up in New England.
Yep.
So I went down there. He said, that's a great idea. I went down there. I was down there for a week. I'm watching the ALCS, Red Sox and A's. Rick Honeycutt gets a comebacker, flips it to second base. Walt Weiss is at second. He gets taken out by Ellis Burks, blows his knee out. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, what are they going to do now? And I'm not kidding you. Hours later, they called to see if I was still in Arizona. And they said, Bordick's got to beat us in Oakland. He's going to be on the World Series roster. JP, are you serious, man? I mean, it was unbelievable. You want to talk about a dream, and like my whole life completely changed from being a player in AAA, questioning if that's the limit. Now I get a taste of the big leagues and get an opportunity to go to the World Series. And actually, I made a couple plays in the World Series. I never started, but I still think to this day, the best plays I've ever made in my life are the plays in the World Series. I mean, the intensity, being so nervous, having to trust on just instincts because just overwhelmed with pressure. I mean, it was incredible. And man, that changed my whole perspective on the game. And the next year, believe it or not, I didn't even make the team out of spring training, but I knew in my heart of hearts, the only place I ever wanted to play again was the big leagues. I got called back up, I think the beginning of July, maybe the end of June, and never looked back. I had an opportunity to play in the big leagues for almost 14 years.
So, what's funny about the story is there's a lot of guys out there that sit there and say, where's my opportunity coming? When's my opportunity coming? You do need a sponsor in some ways when you're not the guy that is the most gifted. Someone has to stand up there for you. And so many guys you've talked to in your career that maybe they didn't get that guy. I mean, a lot of it is fate. A lot of it is luck. A lot of it is, but most of it is putting yourself in that situation. And obviously, the ability to catch the ball was the most important thing for Tony. Those teams were loaded, so it wasn't like they needed another bat. They just needed someone to be able to. I remember because they called me and they said, "Do you know where Bordick is?" I says, no. They said, we need to get him to the big leagues. I said, well, we can find him. And then you were in Arizona. You were down with Burleson.
Hmm. Yeah.
Crazy, huh?
I mean, it's so bizarre. It really, really is.
What's your takeaways from playing for Tony La Russa?
Well, he's by far my favorite manager on many fronts. And I think there are some players, obviously, that maybe Tony didn't get along with for one reason or another. I know he had a huge impact on me. First of all, giving me the opportunity to play in the big leagues and actually trusting me to play for him. Because I think that's a big part of really any player that gets an opportunity to play in the big leagues. Every manager will say this. You better have my trust, because if not, you're not going to get opportunities. And I think La Russa trusted me on many fronts too, because back then the game was different in the sense that we still had situational baseball, and there were still players in the lineup that were trusted to execute situational baseball. Now, when I was a young player, I'm not saying I ever figured out hitting, but Tony would put me in situations to help build my confidence as an offensive player. And like, he would put hit and runs on. He would give me a heads up, like, hey, listen, if Blankenship gets on, you're going to do first pitch hit and run. Look for a sinker down and in and turn on it. Don't force it to the right side.
Right.
He would help me see this stuff and anticipate and just get a better awareness of the big league game. And more times than not, well, I'll be honest with you, it seemed like every time he was right. So I'd execute bunts. I'd feel like part of an offense or part of the offense. And then slowly but surely, my offensive game, I was never really a consistent offensive player, but I had a couple good years, and I think I was able to help teams situationally. And at the end, even going to Baltimore, I had a little bit more power. Of course, Camden Yards was a little different back then.
It's funny you bring that up about La Russa, and so many people, they think the hit and run, that it has to always go to the right side. And
Right.
they don't understand that you could still have a hit and run and turn on the ball. And,
Sure.
just when you hear things like that, La Russa bringing it up and mentioning it to you, it just makes you realize how, intelligent of a baseball guy he was, and understanding that you're intelligent enough to be able to handle that situation, to say, hey, it doesn't always have to be this. It can be this, and you can still put the ball in play.
Yeah.
Well, you had a great run in Oakland, and I know you hit free agency. And so this is another funny story. I get a call from Pat Gillick, and he says, hey, JP, he goes, you know this Bordick guy pretty good, don't you? I said, well, I know him enough. He says, we're thinking of bringing him over here to Baltimore. He says, how do you think he'd fit in? I said, he'll fit in great. I said, but I don't think that's your biggest question. He goes, what do you think? I said, I think your biggest question is you better ask Ripken, what he thinks. Because if you're bringing Bordy over to play shortstop, that means you're moving Ripken. Because I knew at that point you were going to pretty much leave. So tell us about you've earned the right to get to free agency. You go to free agency, and why you picked Baltimore.
Yeah, that was it's a really bizarre time and kind of a gut wrenching time, to be honest with you. When the day comes that I actually go to Cooperstown, and as much as I love Baltimore and my time with the Mets, going to the World Series, and of course with you in Toronto, I will go in as an Oakland A. I had a great time coming through the minor leagues. The Oakland A is giving me an opportunity, and playing in the big leagues with some of the greatest players of all time. I mean, I pinch myself to this day to think of the guys that I played with just in Oakland. I mean, Goose Gossage, Harold Baines, Jose Canseco, McGuire, Eckersley, Ricky Henderson, Dave Henderson, Bob Welch. The list goes on, and the impact these guys had on me, I will be forever grateful. So mark my words right there. The Oakland A's, when I get my bust in Cooperstown, okay, because I love that. All right. But I loved every team, I was really a part of. I think baseball players, and as well as anybody, this fraternity we're in is a hard lifestyle, and guys appreciate the guys that are able to work their way through and deal with the mental anguish that every player, every GM, everybody that's involved with the game goes through. Yeah, we love it, but man, there's a lot of heartache. There's a lot of failure. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. And what I think to a man, when you talk to players, yeah, we might miss the competitiveness and maybe making a dive and play, but it's the locker room, it's our teammates that we all miss the most, and sharing that common bond of, come on, man, we got to dig through this. It's game 142. There's only a month and a half to go, and it's 100 degrees out, fighting through the dog days and dealing with the aches and pains. I miss that, man, because that's like, it's just a great bond, a great fraternal bond that only we kind of truly know.
So, what makes you go to Baltimore at this point?
Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of got
all
off
right.
the beaten track. Yeah. Oh, because I was praising Oakland. I go to Baltimore. That's right. Oh, say Pat Gillick, man. What a great salesman. What a great GM too.
Great guy too.
Yeah, he went everywhere and had unbelievable success. I think he had a good feel for what was going on. And sure enough, he contacted my agent, Joe Bick. He contacted me, and I laughed initially, like, yeah, you got Cal Ripken. There's no way this is happening. I just thought it was comical. And he basically said, we're going to do this move, and it's going to be with or without you, but we feel like you could be the best guy for this job. And I did a lot of soul searching. And to be honest with you, it's really weird for me to say this, because in my heart of hearts, I know Cal didn't want anybody to come in and play shortstop. I mean, who the heck would? I know at the end of my career, I went up and played in Toronto, and in my heart of hearts, I felt like I was the better shortstop. Why am I not starting? Well, eventually it did happen, but you accept your roles and this and that. I asked Pat Gillick if I could talk to Cal about it. And Cal did not just openly give me a blessing. He said, you have to do what's right for your family. If you think coming back to the East Coast is good, and it really was, right? Because we're an East Coast family. Yeah. We had a young family. But I also wanted to win again, man. Coming up with the Oakland A's and tasting the World Series in 90 and then the playoffs in 92, yep, and being brought up in that kind of winning culture, man, when you're part of losing, it's just terrible. The seasons are long, and the Baltimore Orioles had just gone to the postseason in 96. Yeah. In my mind, they looked like the team that was going to run off like 4 or 5, postseason appearances, had depth with pitching, and that's all I saw was winning, winning, winning. And I also looked at it as I just remember one night, I told my wife, I said, I got to go away for a second. And I just went all by myself, maybe shed a tear or two, just trying to figure out what I was going to do in the situation. And it came to accepting a challenge. That's really what it came down to. There were easier ways I think I could have gone. Yeah. And I thought this was an incredible challenge, not only to think about winning, but here I got to overcome, Cal Ripken's shoes at shortstop. And it wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. And it took me a while to transition in. But, man, I really loved it. I loved playing in front of the fans at Camden. Camden Yards in the 90s sold out every night. It was like –
How was Cal? How was Cal to deal with it?
Cal was great. Yeah. So, listen, Cal is everything and beyond what is advertised, on and off the field. My first day with the Orioles in spring training, Cal and I started talking. He started talking about pitchers and positioning, and he wanted to have a game of catch. We played catch. And every day I was part of the Baltimore Orioles, Cal Ripken and I played catch. Every day until he sat down. And right. I think that just says enough. He wanted
There's no reason why he wouldn't like you, because Ripken has such a love for the game and such an appreciation of how the game's supposed to be played because of the way he was brought up with his dad.
Yeah.
There's no way he's not going to, like a player like you. I could see Ripken, this is just on the outside, I could see Ripken calling bullshit on the guys that cut the corners. But I don't see him saying a guy like Mike Bordick and saying,
well, honestly, he never said anything derogatory to me or about me that I ever saw or heard, and he was always a great teammate. It was still an old school time where guys would stick around at the end and talk shop and maybe have an adult beverage, and it just seemed like more times than not, it was he and I just sitting there talking baseball, talking about experiences. I have a great Cal story, and I thought this was pretty cool, man, because Cal Ripken, the Iron Man, When I was with the Oakland, if you got a minute
No,
for this?
no, go ahead. Go ahead. These are good stories.
All right, so I'm playing with the Oakland A's. I'm out at shortstop. The great Bob Welch is on the bump. We're in Camden Yards. Cal's got his streak going. He's still a couple years away from breaking Lou Gehrig's record. And Welchie cuts one loose up and in, and it hits Cal on the back of the hand. I was like, what are you doing, man? Are you crazy? Cal gets to first base. First of all, I thought the place was just going to erupt. I thought we were going to be overtaken and the Oakland A's were going to be no more because the Oriole fans were just going to beat us down. Cal gets on first base, and he is telling me this, okay, in the clubhouse at like 1 a.m. We're talking shop, and I asked him about when Bob Welch hit him. He goes, yeah, that pitch was up and in. He goes, I know Welchie liked to knock me down. He goes, but when I got to first base, my eyes were on you, and you were going to left field. Now, this is back in the game when I thought breaking up double plays was part of the game. It is, to preserve the integrity, right? Breaking up double plays was a huge part of it. And I was thinking that because back then, middle infielders, that's what they thought. Oh,
Right.
no, you got hit?
Right.
I better look out, right?
Yeah.
So I was prepared for it. I think there was a base on balls. So Cal gets to second base, and he tells me, he said, you got lucky. He said, my next target was Steinbach. Sure enough, the next pitch, base hit to the outfield. Here comes Cal, and he destroyed Steiny, knocked him out of the game. Steinbach's head bounces off the dirt. Steiny's out of the game, man. Concussion and just gone. And Cal just gets up and goes into the dugout. This is the Iron Man.
Right.
He's about to break Lou Gehrig's record, and he's playing the game as hard as anybody. It was unbelievable.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Oh, man. The problem with these podcasts is you can go on forever, and I'd love to go on forever. But I know John has a couple of questions he wanted to ask you. Go ahead, John.
All right. Thanks, JP. Appreciate it very much. Mike, you got to be in the postseason for 3 different teams, Oakland, Orioles, and, of course, with the New York Mets. What experience did you enjoy the most?
Oh, my gosh. Wow. They were all unique and incredible. I will say this. In 1992, I felt like I was a part of it. Like I really contributed. It was such a special year. So many different great things happened. It was one of my best offensive years. Doug Rader was the hitting coach. Doug was great. And just a quick little story about Doug Rader and baseball. This is what baseball is in a nutshell, okay? It's all right here in your head. In 1992, I met Doug Rader, probably my 10th hitting coach. It seemed like in 8 years. The A's were cycling hitting coaches through nonstop. Doug Rader put his arm around me and he said, when did you have the most success? And I said, well, it was actually in Double A. And I showed him this open stance I had that Jose Canseco had showed me in spring training. And I asked him why he had an open stance. He said, so I could see the ball better. The whole world opened up to me. I had an open stance and I raked. I don't know if you remember in Double A, I was raking. I was hitting over 300, made the All-Star team. It was really bizarre. And I showed Rader this stance. He said, well, take it up there. We were playing an inter-squad game. Grounded out to third base and running down the first base line. The first thing I thought of, every baseball player, here we go again. Getting all in my head, thinking this is terrible. I round third base, I head back, or around first base, come back to the dugout, and I look up, and there's Doug Rader's big old head, and his eyes are this big, and he literally said, we can work with that. And that gave me so much confidence. That was it. It was like my heart grew and grew, and I was like, wait a second, somebody believes in me? And I hit 300 in the big leagues that year. It was incredible. So even though in 92 we didn't go to the World Series, I just felt like I contributed. I was a part of that team from the beginning, and it made me feel good, and it broke my heart when we lost. 90 was a great experience to go to the World Series, to be a part of that, and sit there and watch one of the greatest teams in the history, the Oakland A's. Even though they got swept by the Reds that year, it was just an amazing experience. And to be there after Game 3 and Tony La Russa giving a speech at the end of the game saying, this is what legends are made of, guys. We come back and we win this World Series. You will be a legend in this game forever. And I was about to run through a wall for him. Put me in, Skip. And we ended up getting beaten 4 games. But that was incredible. And the New York experience in and of itself is just amazing. Playing for the New York Mets, being a part of that scene, seeing the stars come in and out of the door. I remember one of the first days I was there, walk into the clubhouse, Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock are sitting on a couch. I was like, wait a second, are you serious? I go to my locker and Chris Rock says, "Hey, Bordick, you don't get this stuff in Baltimore, do you?" Oh my God. And I sure didn't. It was an amazing experience. And that New York Mets team went on a great run. And we beat some really good teams to end up playing in the Subway Series. I mean, wow. What an experience.
You just made John's day. John's the biggest Mets fan in the world. You just made his day,
it was
right?
unbelievable, man. I loved Shea Stadium. The stadium felt like it was going to be coming down. The fans there were incredible.
Yeah.
That experience was really great.
Yeah, I was at that 2000 World Series, and and it was the only one. I mean, there's never been another up to this point. Mets versus Yankees in the World Series. It had to be special. The electricity of the city, Mike, it had to be off the chart for you as well.
I want to tell you something, man. When we were going from stadium to stadium and they shut down the highway, and to see everybody pulled over on the side of the road, either cheering us on like this or flipping us off, it was incredible. And that was so intense and amazing. Like every day, just man, the thump, my chest is just bumping. It was an amazing experience, man. And I hope Yankee fans and Mets fans get to do that again sometime. They deserve it. Great fans up there. They're tough. Don't get me wrong, and it's a tough place to play. But man, what an experience! And nothing better than that intensity in New York City.
Yeah, there's no better place if you are a winner than New York with the fan base there. Wanted to go to another question. Your transition to the booth as a color analyst for the Orioles. Can you take us through that process and how it was to transfer from on the field to color analyst?
Yeah. Well, the Orioles had pretty amazing broadcast crew when I was able to come in. Gary Thorne was the lead play-by-play. Of course, Jim Palmer, Jim Hunter, Joe Angel on radio, Fred Manfred. So they had some classic, broadcasters. And to a guy, they said, "Mike, what you're going to have to do up here is the same thing you did when you played. You got to prepare." So I took that to heart. And every day I'd get to the field 2 hours before and I'd do my homework on the opposing team or go over some things with our team. And what I had learned, and I'm not going to say I was great by any means right out of the gate. I think it takes a little while to get used to your partners and just talking baseball for a few hours. But what I appreciated about it and what I kind of learned and I thought was kind of my little niche, if you will, was the ability to almost coach and talk about the game at the same time, to say why a guy missed a tag or why he made a tag, where his feet were, why a guy made a great play, why he didn't, a certain location on a pitch. I just loved analyzing that, talking about how great these guys are. I'm not one to bash players for mistakes, although you have to point out and you have to say, well, this is why. It's not because he's bad, but this is why. He couldn't quite get his foot into the right position, so he was off balance and didn't quite see the ball. So explaining that kind of stuff, I thought was a blast, man, because I think baseball does not get enough appreciation for, first of all, the athletes that play the game, the athleticism it takes, the cerebral ability to be able to understand what's happening like this, how situations can change in just a split second of where you need to throw the ball. So it's fun to kind of break that stuff down and talk about it and just the human body in and of itself. Now, back in the day, it was more fun because you could talk about guys jumping over, potential base runners that were trying to break up double plays and things like that. But still, the athleticism of these guys nowadays is just off the charts.
Absolutely. I got one final question, and then I'll toss it back to JP. You've known JP for a long time. Tell us about the relationship and share with us your favorite JP story.
Yeah, well, he's like a father to me. There's no doubt about that.
Thanks a lot. Jeez.
JP, I don't even know. I might be older than you. All I know is when we first met, I thought, look at this young guy. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I'm going to be 65.
Wow. Dang, you are one of the oldest guys I know. Anyway, JP, in my opinion, is just an incredible baseball story, right? What he went through as a player, getting into scouting, and then his meteoric rise to the top and becoming a general manager and being such an instrumental part, I think, in this game is incredible. But I think what meant the most to me, to be honest with you, now I think forever JP and I will be linked. It's just a really cool, great American pastime story about how he found me in Cape Cod and gave me an opportunity, and so good things can happen that way. But so here I'm fortunate enough to play through the minor leagues and then in the big leagues. So it was 16 years I played professionally, and who calls me when I'm 37 years old and asked me to play to help some of his young players is JP Ricciardi. I mean, so whatever he saw in me, he thought I might be able to help a couple young players. And I felt so good about that opportunity. I guess the only regret I have is that I didn't come back the next year and help him again, because I just felt like that meant so much to me. And as a baseball player, to go through the gamut of the ups and downs, and then all of a sudden to be in that kind of position where you're looked at as kind of a mentor to baseball players, might have been the most flattering thing that ever happened to me.
Well, I can tell you this: he did an amazing job for us when he came up to Toronto. I begged him to play another year, but I knew he had responsibilities, and he did me a favor by playing that last year. But I had players in Toronto begging me, please bring Bordick back, please bring Bordick back, because of what he did in our clubhouse. And obviously he's a dear friend, but consummate professional, and you always knew what you were going to get with him. I'm really proud of him. He's had just an amazing career, and he's an example for what all these guys who play the game that don't have the greatest amount of talent can become if they work hard. So he's had a great run. He's had a great career, and I always said, and you probably don't want to hear this now, but I thought I was going to get the Mets GM job, and if I did, I was going to call you and see if you wanted to manage.
Wow, let's go. Get your name back in there. I would love to do that.
I just told you I'm 65.
That's okay. I'm an old goat too, man. Let's do it. I want to get back in the game. I miss the game so much.
You should be back in the game. Guys like you should definitely be doing stuff, and it's just, it's unfortunate, but anyway, we could talk about this forever. I can't thank you enough. We're going to get you back on at some point. You were great.
Anytime. Anytime.
Hope the family's good. We'll catch up, and thanks again, Bordy. Good seeing you, buddy.
JP, great seeing you. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. A real good guy, JP. Someone who got to play alongside Cal Ripken as well. So that was a great interview.
Thanks, John. I think Mike's a grinder, and it's nice to hear that every person that comes on this show isn't a star. And I think it's great that other people hear what these guys have gone through, the sacrifices they've made, the persistency that they've showed to be able to carve out a major league career with. Mike Bordick was not a guy who could run, throw, field, power. He really made himself a good player, and out of it had a great career.
Yeah, absolutely. A great interview. But also, JP, I know you've been working the phones, and, we never really tease guests in the future, but I know you connected with somebody that's a real legend in New England and across baseball. And that's someone who I guess everyone could look forward to coming on this show pretty soon. Do you want to give us a clue or say who?
Yeah, well, right now we're going to have Peter Gammons on, Hall of Famer, on the 31st, which is right after the trading deadline, which is when Peter shines. But I mean, we probably need 2 hours for Peter Gammons because of the history of his involvement in the game. I go back a long way with him. I have a long history with Peter. So I think the conversations are going to be great, but it'd be, anytime you can get a Hall of Famer like Peter Gammons on that has seen the game evolve over the years, I think it's must listen. And we're excited to have him right now, tentatively for the 31st of July.
Yeah, I mean, there was back in the day, I remember reading Gammons all the time, as a kid even.
Everybody did.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are guys that stand out like Peter and like Dick Young of the Daily News.
Yep.
These were the true pioneers of baseball reporting. So the fact that you could bring them on this show and share some of that history and talk about the game today, that's going to be a can't miss episode for everybody out there.
I talk to Peter at least 5 or 6 times a year, but every time I talk to Peter, I have to give it a good an hour and a half because the conversations just go so well and go so long, and he's so much fun to talk to, and he brings up not only current things that are going on, but things in the past, and he's a true caretaker of our game, and we're lucky to be able to have him on.
Absolutely. JP, we don't really talk about your social media much, but today I'm going to. You're on X, you're on Instagram, where there are clips of shows, previous shows, some of the real highlights of some of the personalities you've had on the program. So if you want to go and follow JP on social media, on both X and Instagram, it's simply at Ricciardi JP. That's all you need to look for on X or Instagram. Follow them there, and share the videos. I mean, there's some really great content on there. So I know, JP, you're not really a social media, like an everyday social media guy, but I think the fans and the people who listen to this show can get some of that extra content by just logging on to those two accounts. So we recommend you do that. And if you're listening to this show on Apple Podcast, please give it a 5-star review and make a comment there. That really helps us, what they call the algorithms. So we appreciate that as well. JP, until we return next week, have a great week. This is John Arezzi for JP.